Hey guys, welcome back to the Steel Forum. Today we've got part 2 of our series with the man, the legend, Bruce Vaughan. We talk a little bit about parametrics, obviously. We also are talking in this one about some of the lost art that was detailing, some of the, prettiness that we had in our drawings for a long time that maybe now we don't. Talk about professionalism in detailers. We talk about what's coming up here on the Steel Forum.
I actually don't know what I'm doing.
That's just the way of it at this point.
I don't understand.
Oh, I hit escape. Hey! New for 2018. They fixed it.
So I'll have to cut that part out.
Yes, I guess you will.
You know, that detail with revisions thing, that never worked properly. Kind of like adaptive detailing. It's all of a sudden it'll just draws a cloud around the whole beam. So, well, that's not helpful.
Right.
It's like we appreciate the effort, but it's.
I've never used detail with revisions.
Yeah. Oh, I tried. Doesn't work great.
Nick, I think that's something that we should probably talk to Todd about because I believe he utilizes that when doing the MDM software usage. When he's doing model checking. Yeah, I think he does a base detail and then he does revisions as he goes.
Yeah. So we're hoping to shoot an episode with him too, where he's going to teach me about model checking. Now, how is your checking handled, Bruce? Being a one-man show, is that you print it to PDF, set it aside for a while, and then come back with a fresh head, or what do you do?
For many, many years, I worked with a checker. That's all he did was check. And he got to the point where he really didn't want to work so much anymore. So I had to take over some of the responsibility. And basically, I wouldn't even call it checking anymore. It's now, I refer to it as quality control. And so there's certain techniques you can do in your model to assure quality. And try to make use of every technique I can think of in order to assure quality. And part of that is just slowing down. And I'm fine with that because I don't want to work that much either because I'm getting up there in the age as well. I wouldn't recommend that to anybody to not have a checker, but I've been very fortunate not have any bad errors. So I guess when it gets to the point where something bad happens, then I'll have to rethink my strategy.
Yep. And really it's, like we've said before, there's no system that's going to get to 100% all the time. And every once in a while, the stuff that slips in, it's usually, this beam had a cope at one point, but it lost its cope in the end, and then we hit redetail or something like that. But 99.9% of the time, there was this note called out in section 5 that referred you to this other thing, and then there's a typical detail on sheet 65 of the set that's never called, and you didn't do it, and now there's stiffeners missing on this beam.
That's hard to find. You're right. That things like that can easily happen. Yeah. It's not much you can do other than just study every detail.
Yep. You do your best. You study the details. You watch out for it. But it's the real life situation. Do you find that you'll get into a project when you start a project? Do you kind of in your head just think, all right, I can do this with this parametric, and then this with this one, and then this with this one?
Oh, definitely.
Yeah, that's kind of like our same. When I'm bidding a job, I'm like, okay, this will work with the parametrics, or this is not going to. Or same thing with system design connections. The difference between a shear plate, or not a shear plate, a moment plate that's designed by the system and the almost same moment plate that we have to mess with is huge time-wise. It's almost crazy. Like the moment plates, particularly at the top of a column, where you have to do all of that messing with the geometry to get it to work, and then forcing and graphical and all that stuff to get the moment connection just the way they want at the top of a column, versus just extending that column an inch up, and then you get a nice moment connection that's system designed. Those things that make a big difference.
I don't see in my niche, I don't see a lot of jobs with moment plates. Occasionally I will, but do a lot of jobs that have field welded moment connections. Just historically, I've had fits trying to get anything from the system to be what's required, what I'd like to see. Typically, do it like it's not a moment connection and just make it into a moment connection.
Just edit the material, right?
Yeah, that's why I wrote that column moment plates. Column.
Yeah, that's it. It's column plate.
Column RF stiffeners. Yeah.
Yeah. That was one of my first, like the first ones that I really enjoyed were those stiffener plate connections. Because I find, and this is probably just my brain and the way it works, but some of the most arduous things for me to do are those kind of like super simple, but you got to sit in there and do them tasks. Like, back in the day, putting in those stiffeners manually, getting that section cut at the right location and then putting in the plate and then chamfering the sides and all that stuff. It was just not hard, but it's tedious. I hate it. Same thing with like bent plate pour stop, where it was like, oh, man, I can't, like, I've got to do this 10,000 times. And then they end up changing the edge of slab by an inch, and you're like, oh, that's.
Yeah, having these tools makes work more pleasurable. If work could be considered pleasurable.
It should, right? Like this, especially if you're working for yourself. That's one of the things we try to focus on, is this doesn't have to be a misery all the time. Sure, sometimes you're going to be miserable, but you spent your whole life doing this. Like, find some joy in it. Be okay. Put some music on. Have the right tools in front of you. And we were having a discussion with SDS2 a while ago about the buttons in SDS2, and I was trying to convey that the problem with the interface in that it's a little bit out of date, or it just kind of looks old. It makes work less pleasant. Now, I don't really care that the buttons look archaic, right? It's not really a big deal for me, but it's strange. It's weird that a program that costs this much and that we use this often hasn't updated that. But trying to convey that in a way that doesn't sound ridiculous, I felt like I never really got through it. Maybe even now I'm not really getting it through, that there is some type of mental weight that these things take on you.
I think that's just what we're going to end up with for a long time. We're just going to keep for a long time, is the way it looks now, until they have another major change in their appearance. I guess what version? 7.0 or 7.1 that they.
7 was when they added transparency, and like that whole. I think that too is when you started to be able to drag dimensions instead of having to like stretch them.
Well, 7.0 is when that was huge because you could actually navigate so much easier in the model.
Oh, yeah.
I think that may have been when they redesigned the way the member screens appeared as well. But anyway, that was huge. 7.0 is when I actually started using SDS2 for erection drawings as well.
Yeah, so we used to do CAD for our erection drawings because it was untenable.
It was difficult to get your labels where you wanted them. That was the big part of it for me, and it was so much easier to manipulate. Now, what a relief it was when I could start doing it in 7.0. Everything worked so much better. Being able to keep everything in SDS2, and after that, I've never used AutoCAD since.
Yeah, we don't even have a license of AutoCAD. We did for like a couple months. We had a specific customer who used
Advanced Steel.
Yeah, yep. It's the AutoCAD. It's the one that Autodesk sells. And so I used that, and it looks nice. Like everything's where you expect it to be. The dialogues work, and that's all really nice. But it turns out that it's terrible at detailing steel.
Yeah.
So like there's the stuff that's really attractive. You're like, oh man, these drawings look fantastic. I've never been able to make SDS2 drawings look the way that I really want them to look, particularly with stuff, like miscellaneous metals, where you want to just draw on a joist and stuff. They're perfectly serviceable, but they're not pretty. And that's fine. It really is. Like it's fine. It's not a problem. But there is a joy in, because we started with a pencil. There is that sense of art that you had when you were doing AutoCAD that is lost now, I think, in SDS2.
Yeah, there was a sense of art drawn by hand, definitely. Then when you do it on AutoCAD, maybe the artwork was somewhat diminished, or you couldn't consider it as being art so much. But yeah, there was still some art involved in how you made your presentations.
Yeah, and SDS2, it's 100% functionality. Like
it's just mass produced.
Right. Our sections
fine.
No longer like we never have like pretty, concrete block and stud wall. It's just lines to get across the message.
I don't know. I think there is still some art in how you make your presentations in SDS2. I still believe that.
Yeah.
It did make my day though,
to make
it in hatching.
That art, yeah, the hatching, copying and pasting the hatching around. I don't know how often you did that, but like to get it into the right way, and you feel silly doing it, but it's like, man, I want it to look like other drawings. There's some of the stuff too that you ask yourself, is it worth my effort to make this look correct, like make it look like the real world, because your information for the steel is already presented. So really the stuff that you're drawing is really just to kind of take off the weight of the person looking at it, trying to understand what's going on. So there's a give and take there.
Well, I tend to, here lately, I tend to get the jobs where there's a lot of concrete, a lot of embedded plate, and then there's a lot of things you have to research the architecturals. And so maybe the setup is not apparent. So sometimes it's advantageous to actually input architectural elements in your model. Mm-hmm. So you've got something to model from, a basis to model from. That's part of the control, quality control that I use, is to get elements in there into the model that your steel has to be relative to. And so you input these elements, you check to make sure they're right, and then you input your framing, and then you can check against the elements. And then the sections are cut from the model. And then as those sections are done and cleaned up for loading on sheets, then you check it again against the model, the architectural, or the architectural model if you have one, but check against the architectural to make sure that the dimensions are consistent.
Yeah, that's huge. One of the biggest advantages for me as a checker, one of the things that I started having my guys do is I need you to model in the deck. I know we're not producing the deck drawings, but model in the deck, because you're going to find a lot of the things that I end up finding and checking where, hey, this deck is unsupported along this edge, or this beam is too high. All of that stuff becomes readily apparent when that deck is in there. If there's a deck direction change that needs to be supported, or just a hole where this didn't end up getting taken care of right. And taking the time to put that in there, although it seems silly because you're not producing drawings in the deck, does make the model much more accurate and tends to make my guys a little bit more accountable for their work.
Well, at some point, your guys will recognize those issues without having the deck in there. I think that may be part of the experience, but yeah, I can see where that would be helpful.
Sometimes we'll end up selling those deck drawings later too, so that it has its other advantages. The disadvantage is that because I don't in my day-to-day, I almost never launch SDS2. I mostly do logistics, checking, all of that stuff. So a lot of that stuff that when you sit down at somebody else's desk is all wrong. That's how I feel every time I sit down at SDS2. Nothing's quite where I expect it to be. I'm not used to it. Like I don't have that muscle memory of, hit this button to hide the right stuff. So like every time I get into a model, the deck is all turned on, where all of my other guys know that, they've got the default filter set up to turn off all the deck so it doesn't get in their way when they're trying to work on stuff.
Right.
So it can be a little bit frustrating for me when I do get back into modeling something because I don't have that same like muscle memory, safe space thing that I should have. Just have.
Well, speaking of working on the model, that's all I do all day, every day. It's either in model or drawing editor, since I do everything myself.
Well, see, you've got those couple customers who know what you're doing. They just that's got to be kind of luxurious, right? Like it's just here's the price and go about your bit. My phone rings, 15, 20 times a day. And that's not even talking about the emails I get. I get probably 20 emails a day that actually need to be dealt with. And it's a whole different thing. So there really is a huge gap between one detailer and 3 detail. Like there's only the 3 of us working full time, but it's that level of management that we need to keep all of those things low is much higher.
Yeah, it's helpful to not have so many customers. One thing that has freed up a lot of my time is that I don't have to bid a lot of projects. I don't have to price them.
Mm-hmm.
I was getting project after project to price, and then I have to look at it and decide, well, do I want to price this job? Is it something that I can fit in, or am I just going to give a complimentary price? And then you have to respond, and then I don't want them to write me off completely, and so maybe I should price the job. So that's an advantage of not having so many customers. But then again, do you take on one job? You take on 2 jobs? How many can you actually do and give it and do the job's justice? I don't want to take any shortcuts in order to take on another project. I don't want to short the job I already have. So it's kind of a juggling act to try to figure out the happy medium.
Yeah, one of the problems that we struggle with is, because we're relatively young as a company, we can't afford to have one of those projects come in where it just dies, right? Like it just, there were RFIs that aren't getting answered or whatever else. And so we're sitting on this project that's 80% complete and we can't bill it. We can't get paid for it, whatever else. Or we have a client who just refuses to pay or refuses to pay in anything near a timely manner. As we continue to grow and expand, and that becomes less of a problem. But it's like you said, you shouldn't put all your eggs in one basket, because even the best intentioned fabricator in the world, stuff can go bad for them. And
well, you can have the greatest customer, and then you can get a job that after pricing it and going through it and looking at everything carefully and know, hey, there's an issue here, there's an issue there. We're going to have to ask submit an RFI. Well, when it comes time to detailing it, you find more issues. You send in more RFIs. What if they don't respond?
Mm-hmm.
What do? Do you stand there and twiddle your thumbs, or do you go sell another job to keep yourself busy, and then
this one comes back inevitably? Right.
So yeah, I have a project now that's been dragging on for about 1.5 years, and you do a little bit here, you do a little bit there, then they respond to one of the RFIs. Well, the response is unintelligible or was totally unrelated to what you asked for to begin with. So then you have to submit another RFI for the RFI response, and anyway, there's not much you can do about that other than try to avoid those jobs completely.
Yeah, we keep like tweaking our terms in our contract to deal with those situations a little bit. Like, if a job sits out for X number of days and we don't hear anything, it's out of the schedule. We're going to bill for what's done. You got to pay us for that, and like all of these things, so that, because we've had it before where the job sits for 2-3 months, and then they come back and they finally have answers to stuff, and we're in the middle of another project. They've got to wait. And then it comes to the end and they're like, oh, well, you caused all these delays. No, I didn't. Like, you got to understand, I'm not sitting here waiting for you guys to just pull the trigger. I can't do that. And we talk about it all the time. You can explain that to them logically, and their logical half of the brain understands that, yes, you're not their only detailer, and yes, you have to pay your bills. But the other half is still angry at you and still doesn't like you. And there's that, I don't know what to do. You try to find that sweet spot of explaining to them. It's beyond my power to sit here waiting for this thing to come back.
Well, whatever, you just have to keep your cool and be professional about it.
Yeah.
That'd be smart business, but you got to stay cool about it.
Yeah. And that's,
as long as you act professional and do the right thing. If your customer still gives you a hard time, then maybe you need to find another customer.
Yeah, that's exactly it. And there are times too, like, be careful about emails too, because the tone in emails is just terrible. Every time you read an email, you assume the worst possible tone. This person is angry, and then you call them up, and it turns out that it's fine. You know, they understand, they're reasonable. It just they've got a bad tone. And one of our customers specifically always sounds like he's poking us, like always, like constantly, but he's not. That's just his style. He's actually perfectly reasonable, and he just has this tone about him that's always this kind of negative. So, but the professionalism in detailing, I don't know what it is about detailing and professionalism that those two things very rarely coincide. With the number of detailers that should be running their own business and have those same skills that are required to run a business and to detail are very, very few. There's so many great detailers who are just terrible, terrible business people.
Be your best. That's all you can do.
Yeah. Pick up the phone though. Answer, like if somebody's calling you, hiding underneath the bed and cowering is not going to help things. Like it's not going to make things any better. And the only time I will not answer the phone is when I know they're calling to ask me for drawings and I'm putting together the drawings right now, and this next 20 minutes I'm spending doing that, and you'll just have to wait the 20 minutes. But short of that, if we're behind schedule, whatever else, is, hey, this is going on. We're doing our best. We're dedicating the resources that we can to it, but here's what you should expect, honestly.
That's good advice. Just tell the truth.
Yeah, it's easy to say. It's harder to do, but it's much harder not to do. You're going to be punished a lot more for trying to hide those things. Your life is going to be miserable because you're always going to have tension in your back of your head thinking, yeah, this guy is angry at me. And every time that phone rings, you look at it with a sense of fear. You don't want that. All right. I think we've rattled on for an hour. We'll have to, cut this up and cut it down a little bit. But we appreciate your time. We'll talk a little bit more after I wrap it up. But we just want to thank you for coming on. Thank you for all your hard work in these parametrics and that kind of sharing attitude. It's made our lives all a little bit better, and we hope to follow in your example.
Well, my pleasure to be here with you guys.
All right, guys, that wraps up a part 2. In the next part, we continued talking after we thought we were done, and we picked up some really good content there, so I want to cut that together as well. So that'll be part 3. It's coming up. We also have upcoming some videos talking about the NASCC and why you as a detailer should be attending the NASCC. And as always, we'll have more tips and tricks for you on how to make yourself an even better detailer here on the Steel Forum.